Ziru, priestess of the god Nana. While the language of Sargon's court in the northern part of the alluvial plain was Semitic, and his daughter surely would have had a Semitic birth name, on moving to Ur, the very heartland of Sumerian culture, she took a Sumerian official title, En-Heduana. En, chief priest or priestess, Hedu, ornament, Ana, of heaven. She moved into the Giparo at Ur, an extensive and labyrinthine religious complex containing temple, quarters for the clergy, dining and kitchen and bathroom areas, as well as a cemetery where En priestesses were buried, though some were interred under the floors of their houses. Records suggest that offerings continued to be made to these dead priestesses. That one of the most striking artifacts, physical proof of En-Heduana's existence, was found in a layer datable to many centuries after her lifetime, makes it likely that she in particular was remembered and honoured long after the fall of the dynasty that had appointed her to the management of the temple. The evidence is an alabaster disc, unearthed broken by Leonard Woolley in 1926. On the back is inscribed, En-Heduana, Ziru, priestess of the god Nana, wife of the god Nana, child of Sargon, king of Kish, made an altar and named it Dais, Table of Heaven. On the front, as restored from the separate pieces found by the excavators, a low relief strip mimicking the impression of a cylinder seal shows the great lady herself, dressed in a pleated woolen gown and engaged in her religious duties, standing behind a naked, shaven-headed priest who is pouring a libation. To her right stand two further figures, one bearing a wand and another carrying a handled jug or ritual basket. She raises her right hand in a devotional gesture. The expression on her face, shown in profile, is stern. Her nose is fleshy. Also found in the rubble were seals and seal impressions otherwise confirming her time at the temple, identifying, among others, Ada, estate manager of En-Heduana. O En-Heduana, child of Sargon, Sargadu the scribe is your servant. And, charmingly, Ilum Palilis, hairdresser to En-Heduana, child of Sargon. Though ownership of a hugely expensive item like a lapis lazuli cylinder seal means that this was probably the supervisor of the palace wig and makeup department. Sitting in her chamber, or perhaps her office, for the director of an enterprise as large and prestigious as the Nana Temple of Ur, must surely have been afforded the very best working arrangements, her hair beautifully coiffed by Ilum Palilis and staff, dictating to her scribe, perhaps the very Sargadu whose seal Woolley found. En-Heduana proceeded to make her permanent mark on history by composing, in her own name, a series of more than 40 extraordinary liturgical works, which were copied and recopied. For she heard that her husband had been killed, so why did she keep silent about him? It is she who killed her husband. Her guilt is greater than that of the men who killed him. In the assembly of Nippur, after the case had been resolved, Nana Sig, son of Lu Sin, Ku Enlila, son of Ku Nana the barber, Enlil Enam, slave of Ada Kala the gardener, and Nin Dada, daughter of Lu Ninurta and wife of Lu Inanna, were given up to be executed. A verdict of the Assembly of Nippur. The difficulty with cuneiform documents is demonstrated by the fact that in an earlier translation of the very same text, by Samuel Noah Kramer, the woman was acquitted and freed. Whatever the verdict, it is clear that this trial assembly at Nippur was no gathering of oligarchs, restricted to the great and the good. Ordinary workers took part in the proceedings to plead for or against the accused: a bird catcher, a potter, a gardener, a soldier attached to the temple of Ninurta, a man described as a commoner, the lowest rung of the social scale. Justice in the Ur-III Empire was, as it is supposed to be with us, a matter of trial before one's peers. But unlike in our courts, punishment too was determined by these same common folk, rather than by professionals, rather like the people's assessors in the courts of the former Soviet Union, who not only had the power to return a verdict, but also to call witnesses, examine evidence, determine punishment, and award damages. But therein lies a difficulty. Each city no doubt had its own legal traditions, and the outcome of a trial, the punishment imposed, might depend more on where the judgment was handed down than on the nature of the crime. To avoid such an unwelcome result, laws were now promulgated by the state, specifying punishments for a wide variety of criminal offences, to be applied throughout the Neo-Sumerian Empire. The first known of these legal compendiums is the Code of Ur-Nammu, as it is usually called, although it is neither a true law code, being far from comprehensive, nor, some say, even introduced by Ur-Nammu, but by his son. Ur-Nammu was the founder of the Ur-III dynasty. His son, Shulgi, was the greatest of all Neo-Sumerian monarchs. Code or no, although we only have fragments, they are enough to show that the laws covered both civil and criminal matters. Among criminal provisions it specifies which should be capital offences: murder, robbery, deflowering another man's virgin wife, and adultery when committed by a woman. For other misdemeanours, the penalty was a fine in silver. If a man committed a kidnapping, he is to be imprisoned and pay 15 shekels of silver. If a man proceeded by force and deflowered the virgin slave woman of another man, that man must pay 5 shekels of silver. If a man appeared as a witness and was shown to be a perjurer, he must pay 15 shekels of silver. In contrast to the more famous laws of Hammurabi, drafted some 3 centuries later, with its savage provisions of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, mutilations, too, are to be financially compensated. If a man knocked out the eye of another man, he shall weigh out half a mina of silver. If a man knocked out a tooth of another man, he shall pay 2 shekels of silver. If a man, in the course of a scuffle, smashed the limb of another man with a club, he shall pay 1 mina of silver.